Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. That's much better. For taking the time to be here tonight. I think that it's a less cold night than it has been in some places that we've gone, and that's great. But we really appreciate you coming here tonight instead of doing something else that you might want to do. We know that you're here to share your stories. At least we hope you are here to share your stories. Others may take the opportunity to listen. But regardless of why you're here tonight, whether you're here to tell your stories or to listen, I just want to express the deep gratitude of my panel members for your public involvement and your interest in Alberta's future. We understand that Albertans are frustrated and angry, and that part of that anger involves Alberta not receiving a fair deal from the federal government and some other provinces, and we hear that frustration. Even many Albertans who wholeheartedly support remaining in Confederation want to see significant reforms that will allow the province to develop its resources and have a larger voice in the Federation. And tonight, we're here to listen to you. However, this evening is not the time to talk about the budget. If you wish to discuss matters pertaining to this or any other government policies, please contact your MLA. We're here to listen to how Alberta's present position has impacted your daily life, your ideas for Alberta's future, and how we can achieve a more equitable future. The panel will focus on ideas that will strengthen Alberta's place in Confederation, while also improving our province's economic position. We've been provided with a series of possible options for further examination. Some of these have been proposed before, but we're not limited to those ideas, and we'll be looking at all ideas and encouraging Albertans to share their thoughts. Over the last couple of months, we have conducted a number of town halls across the province, and we are continuing to consult with experts and undertaking other research on how best to define and secure a fair deal for Alberta. We're also looking at how best to advance Alberta's vital economic interests, such as the construction of energy pipelines. Our goal is to develop a report outlining what we have heard, as well as our recommendations for further actions that the province can take. And this work will be concluded by March 31st, 2020. The Government of Alberta will then review the recommendations and put forward a plan following the panel's work. We understand that most of the major policy changes that were not included in the government's platform, but which the government thinks may be good ideas, would be put to the people of Alberta in referendum. At this time, we can't comment on the merits of any specific position or idea. The panel's job is to listen first and to use that information to develop recommendations. We will not prejudge the outcome of our deliberations and this very important engagement process. But before we begin, let me take a quick moment to introduce my fellow Fair Deal panel members who are here tonight. Stephen Lougheed. Donna Kennedy-Glans. Jan Yaya. Drew Barnes, MLA Mason Matt Cyprus. Miranda Rosen, MLA Bath Teddy Yao, MLA Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo. And I also wish to acknowledge the presence here tonight of the MLA for Airdrie East, who is also the Deputy Speaker and the Chair of Committees, Angela Pitt. We would ask that you consider the following questions when you're sharing your stories, and I think these are up on the screen. Do you think Alberta is getting a fair deal in the Federation?
No.
If not, what would a fair deal for Alberta look like to you? What should the provincial government do to secure a fair deal for Alberta?
Get rid of the federal government.
If you do wish to speak tonight, but still would like to share your views with us, we would encourage you to provide your input either through an electronic submission or emailing us at info@fairdeal.ca, or filling in an online survey, which will go online actually early next week. This contact information can be found on the postcards at the back of the room. Please take one not only for yourself, but also your family and friends. And on that note, let me pass it over to our facilitator, Heather Collier, who will open the floor for your thoughts. And thank you, Stephen. I should also mention that many of you will know that we had planned this town hall for a week ago, but postponed it because tragically one of our panel members, Chief Jason Goodstriker, passed away suddenly. And we, as an indication of our respect for him and the fact that we will miss him very, very deeply, in the future we felt it best to postpone and to change it to today. So thank you all. Some of you I know were coming out last week, and you were notified on very short notice, so we very much appreciate you being here again today.
Thank you, Chair, for your opening remarks. So before we start with the speakers for tonight, I want to address a few housekeeping items just to make sure we're all on the same page for tonight. I'm going to start by the possibly most important, coffee's in the back. Oh, come on, it's my last town hall that I'm facilitating. You've got to laugh at the jokes tonight. They're not good, I know. And washrooms are out the doors by the doors you came in to your right-hand side. In the event of an emergency, there are fire exits located all around the room here, so just pick one and go. To begin tonight's program, the Fair Deal panel wants to hear your perspectives on Alberta's place in the Federation. As Ms. Lenny said, we're looking for you to consider 3 questions tonight. Whether or not you think Alberta's getting a fair deal, if not, what would a fair deal look like to you, and then what should the federal or the provincial government do to secure that fair deal. But we're not just looking for people to answer these 3 questions. We're also looking to hear people's stories, people's perspectives. We want to know how Alberta's place in Confederation has affected you personally. We have lots of data, we have lots of stats. What we don't have is the personal stories to hear, and we want to hear those from you tonight. How tonight is going to work is that when you entered, some of you may have signed up to speak in the back area with my colleague Katie, and you were given a microphone. Sorry, you were a number. What we will do is, in turn, we will call everyone up in groups of 5 to the front reserved seats, and then one at a time up to the microphone to share their thoughts. Tonight, because we have so many people who want to speak, we're going to have a very strict 2-minute rule. So I will be watching the clock. There is a clock down here. It will count you down. It will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds left. Please be mindful of your time, because I will be trying to close off the comments at the 2-minute mark so we can get as many speakers in as possible tonight. That being said, the 2 minutes is not your only opportunity to share your thoughts with us. You are more than welcome to fill out a comment card, which asks for some key messages. You're more than welcome to email us at info@fairdeal.ca, or go online and fill out our short survey, which will be replaced hopefully soon with a longer survey for you to fill out. Now, before we get going still, I have a couple of ground rules I want to go over. So first, as Ms. Lenny said, we're here to listen and share. This is your chance to share your experience with the panel, and we definitely want to hear that tonight. But we're here to understand, but not to debate. The panel doesn't want to prejudge the outcome of our engagement process, and so the panel will not be commenting on the merits of any proposal at this time. Now, I know everyone knows this, but I'm going to reinforce it because it's very important for the smooth functioning of this event, is that respect is important tonight. That means to each other, to the speaker, to those waiting to speak, and to the panel. So we will ask that no one makes boos, no one shouts out. I will be addressing that as it happens. And lastly, as I said, you have 2 minutes to share, so please be focused in your message because I know it's not a lot of time. And then finally, we have media in the room, so just be aware that anything you say may be anything you say may be used publicly, and so please recognize that. And then finally, I have one final thing. This is not usually in my speaking notes, but someone has boxed in someone's car out in the parking lot. So if we could just ask that The Toyota Corolla, the silver Toyota Corolla with the license plate CCW 7064, and a white Chevy Cruze TNZ 930. Please move your car if you can, because there's people trying to get out tonight. So, thank you. And with that, I'm going to ask speakers 1 through 5 to come to the microphone, please.
My name is Glenn. I'm a small business owner and UCP member who spent most of my life in Alberta. The exceptions were time obtaining graduate degrees in the US and a 4-year stint in the 80s as a child, when my father was forced to move outside Canada for work due to hostile federal government policies wiping out his company. Now, once again, the hostile federal government is doing the same damage, and I may have to move my children out of Alberta as well. Our relationship with the federal government has to change significantly now to prevent these attacks from inevitably continuing and happening again. Alberta is not getting a fair deal in Confederation. A fair deal would look like federal and other provincial governments who support development, free trade, and market access for all of our resources and industries. To get a fair deal, Alberta should quickly take over taxes, pensions, policing, and all other programs being considered by your panel to create firewalls against this government and inevitable future hostile federal governments. We should plan for referendums on further moves away from the government if carbon tax and C-48 and C-69 are not repealed, and if a rapid completion date for TMX is not guaranteed, as well as moves made to revive Energy East and Northern Gateway. It's a mistake to put faith in polls saying a majority of Canadians support pipelines and oil as a sign that everything will just work out. East of Saskatchewan and in the Lower Mainland, pipeline support is not a top issue for any voter. On the other hand, there are millions of Canadians who strongly or wrongly believe that killing the Alberta energy industry is necessary to save the planet from carbon dioxide emissions. That's why 4 of the 5 major federal parties openly campaigned against the energy industry in this past election. 2/3 of Canadians voted for those parties. Cities like Vancouver and Toronto are considering suing the Alberta oil companies over global warming. This emissions propaganda war, which has crippled our energy industry, has now begun against our livestock industry as well. All indications are the Liberals intend to continue phasing out the oil industry. We need to take action now. A fair deal in Confederation would be great, but if that can't happen, we have to consider separation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Speaker number 2.
Good evening, panel members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lloyd Lubner. I live in Cochrane, Alberta, and as you can see, I'm a Canadian Army veteran. For the past several years, as a direct result of the intentional destruction of our energy industry caused by the economic policies of first the Alberta NDP government in collusion with the Trudeau government, Albertans, myself included, have lost well over 100,000 jobs. Provincial unemployment is nearing 7%. Hundreds of small family businesses and companies have closed their doors, filed for bankruptcy, or simply walked away. Hundreds of homeowners across the province have had their mortgages foreclosed, and suicides are becoming commonplace by desperate men and women that cannot cope with the terrible consequences of the continued purposeful neglect of Alberta by the Trudeau government. Many Albertans are working as many as 3 part-time jobs while depending on food banks for survival. Dozens of energy companies have moved to the United States, and many others are in such poor financial condition that they have become delisted by the Toronto Stock Exchange. Trudeau merely shrugs when told of these deplorable facts, and these conditions will only get worse. Trudeau is determined to continue the rape of the province of Alberta with the recent introduction of the national carbon tax, and our once great province is technically in recession. To conclude, I was once very proud to wear the uniform of Canada's Army, but patriotism is dying in Canada today, led by our unpatriotic Prime Minister. I declare to you that Canada is no longer my country. From this moment on, I will support any move that Alberta makes to become an independent republic, to which I will pledge my allegiance. Thank you.
Hello there, good evening. I'm here to talk about a simple thing that everyone here might not know. It's when could the Alberta Provincial Police start its work? There's many advantages to a provincially controlled police force which can respond much more quickly to rural crimes. And there's a rising rural crime epidemic because of this horrible recession that we've experienced because of what's going on the previous speakers have mentioned. The RCMP provides services to Alberta on current contract. Please search for RCMP contract policing on your phone. At the bottom of that webpage on the RCMP website, it's written, can the policing agreements be terminated before their 20-year end date? Yes. The agreements clearly state that they may be terminated on March 31st in any year by either party, the Government of Canada or a province. Parties may give notice of termination 24 months prior to the intended date of termination. So no begging, no negotiation with the federal government required. If we wish, Alberta Provincial Police just provide a notice. And so if there's a referendum on Alberta Provincial Police in the fall of 2020, after this panel finishes up its work, then the Alberta Provincial Police may begin its work April 1st, 2023. I would call it the Alberta Police Service to avoid confusion with the Alberta Pension Plan. Thank you.
My name is Wendy Adams. I'm from Okotoks, Alberta. I'm going to take a slightly different tact, because certainly I believe that Alberta is the abused child of Confederation. One of the speakers at last Saturday's conference said that very eloquently. And certainly the statistics that was provided by speaker number one tells us the many reasons why we must stand, and we may have to stand alone. I'm going to take a slightly different tact in saying that if we have our own CPEI, immigration system, etc., this is actually a backdoor to equalization. As we know, equalization is about tax rate. That means they take all the expenses, your revenues, and that hole in between has to be filled. If you're smart like Quebec is, you run your own CFA, your own Red Cross, your own police department, your own pension plans. What does that do? That bucks up your expense side. Quebec actually has one of the lower average incomes, so their revenue is down. Therefore, they have a big bucket to pour money into. Compare that to Alberta, where our expense side is not as great. By putting in CPP, tax, our own tax system, all of those things that even stand with Quebec, you understand what that's going to do. That increases our expense. Therefore, the bucket and tax route grows smaller. That means that we would, in fact, just by the formula as it stands today, gain in the equalization formula. It's just something for your consideration. Thank you for listening to me and to listening to Albertans. Thank you.
Thank you. And just hold on for a sec. If speakers 6 through 10, just to keep us moving so we can get as many speakers through tonight as possible, can make their way to the front to the reserved seats, that would be great. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name's Grant. I have to confess, I used to live in Ontario. And when I was there was nothing else on the radar but the GTA. And so whatever you decide to do to get Alberta a fair deal, put some teeth into it so that the rest of Canadians feel it in their pocketbooks. Because that's the only way people are going to stand up and pay attention and say, why do I have to pay X amount more because for gas or for my pension plan or whatever, and then they'll start complaining to their politicians, and hopefully we can get a better deal that way. But put some teeth into it, because the rest of Canada, we don't exist to them. We're just not here. And I know, because that's how I used to think. I'm sorry to say, but living here for 13 years has fortunately changed me. Thank you.
Sit down here a little. Okay, ladies and gentlemen and crowd. My name is Bill Forrest. I'm the head of policy for Airdrie East. Alberta's problem is Ottawa. If we don't start paying attention and playing hardball with Trudeau, it'll be just like all the last premiers in Alberta. You know, nobody has really got a fair. Alberta has never gotten a fair deal with Ottawa in the 87 years I've been on this planet. I would like to see a referendum on equalization. In Quebec now, 29 million tons of oil products are moved in and out of Quebec ports, 90% of which shipments of crude oil products are out of Montreal and Quebec. And yet, the West Coast tankers are banned. Yet Ottawa stiffens $18 billion of money from us to Quebec. If we wait to have a referendum, we most likely will have another Conservative Party, and we will very likely be in a minority position in the next election. People in Alberta are very upset with transfer payments and the lack of understanding of the federal government and mostly Trudeau. Nothing will happen if we don't make it happen. So let's make it happen now.
Franco Terrazano, Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Over $600 billion. That's how much more money Albertans have sent to the federal government, and by extension to the other provinces, than we have gotten back in return since 1961. But at the same time, we still have politicians in other provinces oppose our development in our time of most need. How is that fair? I think Albertans now understand that we're not going to get anything from Ottawa or the other provinces if we're not even willing to fight for it. And I firmly believe that Albertans are ready to fight for fairness. Now, while I appreciate that a fair deal for Alberta can mean many different issues and many different topics, but there's a key issue that isn't specifically within your issue, and of course I'm talking about equalization. But trying to get a fair deal for Alberta without tackling equalization is like swinging for the fence, then running straight to second base without even glancing at first base. To be frank, there can be no fair deal for Alberta without us tackling equalization. I'd also like to move to the Canada Pension Plan, and there is some merit from withdrawing from the CPP. But if we are to withdraw, we should not merely recreate the program, we should reform it and improve it. And that's because the CPP acts more like a Ponzi scheme than it does your typical investment fund. Now, Albertans are also ready for more autonomy and accountability, and that's why the tax point suggestion is such great policy. And we should have more say over how we collect revenue and spend it, specifically with healthcare. Now, I'll leave with one last point. Our Alberta government debt has recently passed $70 billion due to massive overspending over the years. None of these proposals give the government a blank check to overspend. Thank you so much.
Well, Bill, my name is David Elderfield. I've been in Calgary area for 38 years, and I came here for university, worked in engineering, worked in high tech, and worked through the development of high tech and cellular and the various areas like General Dynamics, which was helped out by Ms. Lenny's work in Western Diversification, as well as Novotel, where we built the manufacturing facility in Lethbridge. Mr. Lougheed's work in Alberta Innovates has also been in my career. I'm here because I want to absolutely support the decentralization of CRA's capability. They are becoming a huge force in this country and have almost no accountability. And I want to see Alberta become the force and the speakers that control how our money is pulled together from the income tax and how it is spent locally. I've had an experience that is one of the horrible stories that CRA has every once in a while, where I worked for 16 years in high tech, I paid my bills and I paid my taxes very happily, brought my family up, built a house, designed my house, built it myself, and did many, many patents that were strong and developmental patents towards the development of data communications and GPS. When 9/11 happened, I had an opportunity 2 years later to put together a company that would address border security using the accumulated data communications and GPS capability I had built. We spent our own money, we spent after-tax money, we built a company that was in strategic partnership with Equifax, Alcam, CP Ship, CSAFE. It was a well-presented solution, and we had the support of many, many different major development ministers in the federal government. So,
Sir, if I can just ask you to wrap up.
yes.
Thanks.
So what I'm here to say is my here, CRA, pulling out of the CRA's control, is going to be an issue because we're not being patriotic enough. I have Alberta friends who are in agreement with that, but Ontario friends who say you're not being a patriot. I want to just say patriotism is Canadian, but the way it's delivered is always supposed to be based on regional strength. We will absolutely control the money more efficiently because we have major experience in doing mega projects and handling large funds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm strongly in support of our provincial government taking steps to secure a better deal for Alberta. I think it's important to start with initiatives that are constitutional and readily achievable. We've heard media reports that some people want a referendum this year on separation. Well, maybe, but I don't think the timing for that is particularly good. Unfortunately, prior to last spring's election, we had more than a decade of pretty bad governance in Alberta. To use an NFL playoff analogy, we're backed up on our own 1-yard line. I think we should get a couple of first downs before we start throwing long, high-risk passes from our own end zone. To get things rolling, I'd like to see our government create a provincial pension plan, as Quebec has already done. This proposal has several attractive features. Number one, it represents real money. Reports by the Fraser Institute and by AIMCO indicate that it could mean a net gain to Albertans of $3 billion. That's $3,000 million each year. Number two, it would demonstrate Alberta's serious intent. Decision makers in central Canada are unmindful of what's happening here in the West. Setting up an Alberta pension plan would get their attention. And number three, our province needs to put some points on the board. This would give hope to long-suffering Albertans who are losing confidence in all levels of governance. The Albertans we know are counting on Premier Jason Kenney and his government to champion our province's interests. Members of the panel, thank you for undertaking this public service on behalf of all Albertans.
And speakers 11 to 15 could start making their way to the front. And also, I just wanted to note that at the end of the event tonight, the panel will come down and do a bit of mingling with everyone. So if you don't have an opportunity to come talk tonight, there will be an opportunity to talk to the panel one-on-one.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you all, and a special thanks to the representatives of the Fair Deal panel. What I'm going to speak on is more important than some people realize. Change needs to happen now, and as now, most Canadian provinces don't have fair and equal representation in the House of Commons. Canada belongs to everyone, not just to Ontario and Quebec. Equal power should be given to every province. Albertans wanted change with this last federal election. Liberals got in. Why? Because between our three provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, we have only 62 seats. Between the other two provinces, Ontario and Quebec, they have 199 seats. Quebec has 78 MP seats in comparison to the combined three western provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, which have only a grand total of 62 electoral seats. This leaves us with no say. Is that a fair representation of all Canadians? No, it doesn't represent all Canadian views, especially Alberta. No two provinces should have all that power to govern their agenda for all of Canadians. Canadians deserve better. Each province matters. Every Canadian voice does matter. Every province is unique and have their own concerns, values, religious beliefs, economic and social issues. All Albertans deserve and want to be heard, listened to, treated fairly, and taken seriously. All governments need to remember that they are voted in by the people, for the people, and they are to be working for all Canadians. We want to be respected, valued, and have equal power and have fair representation. Then there's to be reformation for all, for the equal distribution of seats, not based on population, but on fair representation throughout Canada. We want action now by our provincial and federal governments. All the premiers, political parties need to get together and push this through. Allow every Canadian voice count. Reunite Canada by giving Alberta a voice. Ottawa, prove to Alberta that you do care what Albertans have to say. Not by promises, colorful words, or by your actions. Quit destroying Alberta's economy. Decade after decade has gone by and things don't change within our federal government. We have been given promises, told to wait, be patient. Albertans' tolerance has come to an end and we don't want to wait anymore. Our federal government is broken. If Alberta cannot be treated fairly, have all our voices heard, and a new deal cannot be made, then this government has an obligation to hold a referendum on exploring the option and ultimately separating from Canada.
Thank you.
Esteemed panel members, ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Campbell. I'm the president of the Alberta Independence Party. Alberta has been blessed with an abundance of riches, which we have happily shared with Canada for many decades. When it recently came time to reciprocate this generosity and love, we have been told to pound salt by our eastern overlords. Although we are the economic engine of this country, we have been granted absolutely no say in our own destiny. We are nothing but serfs, ruled over by overbearing and uncaring oligarchs who are heartless to us, our culture, and our heritage. You folks, however, can help us chart a new course. A course where we have fulsome say in our future and our destiny. By putting forth autonomous measures, such as developing our own pension plan, instituting our own provincial police force, appointing our own chief firearms officer, by opting out of federal cost share programs, and implementing our own Made in Alberta Constitution, you will be plowing the first furrow to what we truly aspire to, which is full departure from this abusive and incestuous relationship that is called Confederation. Thank you for listening to me. Again, my name is David Campbell, and I am an Albertan.
Good evening. My name is Reuben Nelson. I was born in Calgary and raised there 80 years ago. The landscapes of Alberta were imprinted on me early, and I've traveled almost every part of this province and to every part of Canada. I love this province and I love this country. My dad died when I was only 5, so Mom raised 3 of us on her own. And when I would get in a fight with my older sister, I would often holler for my mother to make her stop because she was bigger than I was. And Mom would come and separate us. She would look at my sister and say, "I'll get to you in a minute." And then she would ask me, "And what's your contribution to this fight?" I was raised to take responsibility for the things I'd contributed to and clean up my own act before I hollered for others. And I've come to the conclusion that Alberta needs a mother. We holler as if we've been done dirt. It's not fair. We want to make them stop. But in all of this discussion, there has never been a word about our contribution to the mess we're in. It reminds you that to this date, Alberta has never created a formal capacity to look into the emerging future so that we wouldn't be run over by history. And in my lifetime, we've been run over by history several times, and every time we've complained that they did it to us, without us ever, in a sense, turning on our headlights so we could see what was ahead of us. We also haven't asked TransCanada Pipelines why they didn't build XL on the right-of-way of their existing pipeline. And I'm willing to suggest that had they done that, there would be oil in that pipe today, which would solve some of our problems. So let's clean up our act. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Berglund, born and raised Calgarian. My mother grew up just north of here in Carstairs, moved to Calgary when there were about 70,000 people in Calgary. My father moved there around the same time, and he was born and raised in southern Manitoba. So I guess that's where I'll start my perspective on this issue. My father's family moved to southern Manitoba in 1874, and they moved there from Russia because there was available land and they were allowed to work hard, raise their family with little government interference. And that's all they wanted to do. They wanted to work hard and contribute and raise their families. I guess I would have a similar perspective on things. That's what I'm interested in doing, without a lot of government interference, particularly federal. The other starting point I have is that many years ago, when the Charlottetown and Meech Lake Accords were being hotly discussed, if you weren't from Quebec speaking French, you were the ROC, you were the rest of Canada. Everybody was lumped in together as if everybody who spoke English was one distinct group and everybody that spoke French was another distinct group. And I guess that's something that I'm not really quite comfortable with. I think that we as Albertans and other distinct parts of the country need to be recognized that and take responsibility for that. So given that context and a little bit of my background, I would say that Canada is an economic union made up of 5 or 6 distinct zones. And so in my mind, this is not a question of is this a fair deal? It's really a question of what are we willing to accept? And I don't believe that we should be accepting what's happening to us right now. So I'm pretty adamant. Our economic union is broken beyond repair. We are a distinct society in an abusive relationship, and it is no longer acceptable to be in this relationship. We have to chart our own course now.
Thank you.
I'm Ron Hansen. I'm a rancher, not a politician, but I've had to negotiate with government a number of times, and unless I had a powerful bargaining tool, I never got very far. I would like to congratulate the Conservative government on the proposals they've got, and I hope we can succeed in getting them, but they aren't much good to us unless we can have some kind of an equal representation. And we absolutely have to get the Senate changed to an equal type of representation, and the Senate has to have control of all bills have to be passed by the Senate before they can become in law from the House. I think we don't have a bargaining tool right now. I think separation is the big tool. And I think the provincial government would be wise to set up a committee to tell the people of Alberta what their alternatives are. Do we separate as a province? Can we do it as a county? What is the percentage that we have to make it pass? We have to have those things so that Alberta knows, and Alberta can take that to the federal government so they know we're serious. Because if they grant us or concede to us some of these things, there's nothing stopping them from next year or next term changing it, because we don't have enough representation to do anything about it. Thank you for my hearing me.
Thank you. Speaker 15, and can I have speakers 16 through 20 to start making their way to the front, please?
Good evening, panel. I'm Maurice Peugeot. I'm a born Albertan. I think that over the years, I've seen all of our governments deal with the federal side. Some more aptly, others with disgrace. But really, what it amounts to is, as an Albertan, I manage an engineering and consulting firm, and most of our contractors basically are not employees. So one of the things that hides unemployment in Alberta is the fact that we have a significant contractor base of self-employed individuals that either provide engineering services or other supervisory services. And so as we look back in what's occurred in Alberta, the unemployment statistics really don't hold true to what's really went on in this province. So that's one of the things that's gone on in this last downturn, and it's never represented at the national level. So I remember hearing Premier Kenney talk about he wants to have a strategic approach. Well, I'll give you one strategic approach is we have 5 national parks. I think Alberta should make these Alberta parks, because if you want to get attention to the rest of Canada, just take some national parks away from them. One of the other things, of course, that needs to occur is that the recent carbon tax shows abuse. So let's just look at it. Calgary has 117 frost-free days. Victoria and Vancouver have 237 frost-free days. Greater Toronto Area, Montreal have 203 frost-free days. It's colder in the west, and we're not talking Edmonton, Fort McMurray, Regina, Winnipeg. That's the deep freeze there. And so the reality is that we've just been abused by having to take on this carbon tax already. So I would encourage you to forge ahead, push hard, and we're going to have to really do something serious. Is it taking over the national parks? I don't know. It's everything everybody's talked about and then some. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, 16.
16, okay. Good evening, panel. Peter McCaffrey from the Alberta Institute. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you again, and thank you for all the work you've done going around all the province. It's greatly appreciated. I'm going to repeat the key thing that I said to you last time I spoke to you, which I think is, from all the discussions I've had with Albertans around the province, the most important thing that I've heard from all of them, which is that it's a real shame that equalisation is not included in your mandate. I don't understand why it's not. The value of equalisation transfers out of Alberta is probably 20 times the value of all of the other things that you'll be discussing combined. And while that doesn't mean we shouldn't do any of the other things, if we don't solve equalisation, we will be right back in the situation again in a couple of years, if and when the economy recovers. So I've spoken to people right around the province, and everybody's talking about equalisation. Yes, they want to bring the pension plan back, and yes, they want more control over taxes, and yes, they want more control over this and this and this. But if we do not fix the fundamental problem with equalisation, then unfortunately all of your time on this panel would have been wasted, and I really don't want to see that happen. I have 1 minute left, so I'll go into a little bit more policy detail about equalisation specifically. The important thing to remember about equalisation is that equalisation isn't just bad for Alberta, it's bad for every other province as well. It's socialism for provinces. It transfers money from provinces that have good public policies, that grow their economies, create jobs, and stimulate their economies, to provinces that do not reform their policies. They keep bad policies, they don't extract their resources, and they implement bad things in their own provinces. And the incentives that creates are really terrible, because it means that if Alberta improves our policies, we lose a huge chunk of the benefit from improving our policies. And if Quebec, for example, not to name any specific province, were to improve their policies, they would lose many of the benefits they're currently receiving. So the incentives that are placed on politicians in provinces across the country are completely distorted by equalisation. I see I'm out of time, so I'll leave it. But thank you. Please ensure that you cover equalisation in your report. It's the absolute most important thing you can touch on.
Speaker 17. 17.
Okay, I've never done anything like this before, so give me a break. I'm just trying not to piss myself. Federalism is futile. If every single person west of Winnipeg voted Conservative, Trudeau would still be Prime Minister. That's a fact. When Trudeau became leader of the Liberal Party, his only challenger was Dr. Marc Garneau, an astronaut, naval officer, minister of transport, and head of the Canadian Space Agency. I think he was qualified, but who'd they pick? They picked a damn drama teacher. Before that, we elected Harper, a Westerner, to Ottawa. And the Supreme Court and the news media bent over backwards to destroy him. Can anyone here cite a single example where the Supreme Court sided with Harper? Not a chance. The Supreme Court is as predictable as the sunrise, and they are there to ensure Liberal policy continues, whether the Liberals are in power or not. Mr. Manning ran for PM with a slogan of "The West wants in." How'd that work out? Michelle Rempel ran with a slogan of "Send Trudeau a message." We did, and he ignored it. Why shouldn't he? He has Toronto, Southern BC, and Quebec. In the words of Liberal Senator Keith Davey, "Screw the West, we'll take the rest." We better wake up. Federalism is futile. If you want to give Jason Kenney a message, tell him the West wants out.
Good evening, my name is Don Stacey. I had the privilege of growing up in this area and have lived other parts of the country and have always come back. And I think anybody who is in this room that's lived here for a while, they know there's a difference here. And we're losing that. I think we are having it taken from us. And I think there's two elements that could help us bring that back, in addition to the many, obviously very functional and useful ideas. But I think I heard it mentioned earlier was the idea of a constitution. Our premier, when he was campaigning, mentioned that at one point. I think that is seriously worth looking at, understanding what are the elements of that, how complicated is that. We need to be in the long game here. We need to think 20, 30, 40 years down the road. The other thing that was just mentioned are the courts. I think no matter what we do here, the courts are currently at all the higher levels federally appointed by the Prime Minister. And we've seen the results of that. And it's not positive when it comes to some of the values that I think you see that have helped develop this province. So I think between those two things, we have to become very serious, very focused on understanding what it's going to take and move forward in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker number 19, please.
Hi, my name is Spencer Matthews. I've had the pleasure of speaking to this panel before when you guys came to Calgary. Chief Jason Kenney was there, and unfortunately he's not with us today. But I spoke about Senate reform, and my stance is still the same, and my understanding of the Senate is even more so since I've spoken when you guys were here in Calgary. And all I've learned about is the hypocrisy in the system, how little influence the Senate has and how dominated it's become by prior governments. And just like the gentleman who just spoke, the PM appointing everybody in the Senate has just led to a gross majority of left-leaning individuals in the Senate, despite them declaring themselves as independent. There's a growing independent caucus in the Senate, and instead of presenting their bias as it stands, they decide to cloud that with rhetoric. Why do they get to cloud their bias with rhetoric when Alberta has to remain in Confederation and our bias and our say isn't shown in Confederation? I don't think there's a fair deal in Constitution, and that's plain and simple. We're treated as a resource province that's meant to give and never receive. And the only way there's ever going to be any change in that kind of arrangement is if there's representation in the Senate and higher bodies of our legislative government is reformed. Unfortunately, it's easier to separate from Canada than it is to create constitutional reformation. We'd have to get a 50% majority in 7 out of the 10 provinces and still have 50% majority out of the total population of Canada in order for constitutional reformation to take place. Whereas if we just wanted to separate from Canada through the Clarity Act, we'd just have to have a 50% majority in Alberta. So there's an inherent problem in that arrangement. So I'd just like to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm asking speaker 20 to come to the microphone, please. Can I ask speakers 21 through 25 to come up to the front? And speaker 20 to the microphone, please.
Good evening, panel. My name is Steve Klein, albeit not related to the same fella. Now, I would like to first acknowledge the fact that this carbon tax is a killer. Now, I'm closer to a nickel than bark to a tree, and I want to make damn sure that I spend my money wisely on food and fuel, which are the two things under my current pension administration are not allowed when it comes to a raise in the pension. For example, I received a $2.50 raise in my pension, but it didn't cover food or fuel. Having said that, with our part-time acting Prime Minister, who can cry on cue when it comes to national Indigenous peoples, I would like to have us, as a province, really, as echoed by many of the other people, put forth a real solid defense or an attack. Maybe the best defense is to go on the offense and just nail somebody's butt to the cross. The other thing I would like to know, and I don't know if it's possible, but is there not a withstanding clause when Alberta joined Confederation that says we don't have to swallow some of the things that are being forced down us? I don't know. I'm not sure of that. But at any rate, I think we do have to strike while the iron's hot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask speaker 21 to come to the microphone, please?
Hello, members of the panel, everybody here. I agree with a lot of the things that were said about Chief Firearms Officer, Alberta Police, even immigration, control over immigration, and our own pension plan. But I also want to talk about the equalization. Right now, we think that we're really nice people and we're sharing with the rest of Canada, and we're really not. What we're doing is allowing other have-not provinces to remain have-not provinces. They are not doing what they need to do to grow their economy. For instance, the Premier of Nova Scotia closes down a 3,000 job pulp mill because it's killing a couple fish a year. So that's 3,000 families out of work. And he doesn't have to worry because Alberta's going to fund his social programs, his health care. Who cares about those 3,000 people? Because he's going to be fat and happy with his salary and his pension and everybody is good. So I think that we need to consider that. And I think that we can say, oh, well, if you don't give us this, then we'll separate. But if we're not serious about separation, it's gonna show. They're gonna see right. Oh, they're gonna see. Hello? They're gonna see right through it. And we're gonna look pretty weak, and that's a terrible place to start bargaining from. So I think we gotta be serious. And I personally, I think this exercise I don't see the value of it because I don't think it's gonna happen, that we're gonna be able to do very much. I don't think we're gonna get pipelines. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere where we need to be without separation. Thanks.
Good evening. During Meech Lake,
the Premier of Quebec, I believe it was René Lévesque, ran into the PMO's office, shaking a document like this angrily and said, "Is this true?" And Pierre Elliott Trudeau stated, "Yes, it is. Now you see those 2 suitcases of money? Take them, get out of here and shut up." What Lévesque ran into the PMO's office to read, I'm going to read a little bit of it. In 1893, Queen Victoria did repeal the enacting clause in Section 2 of the British North America Act 1867, thereby removing any real... Of course they would, okay. Thereby removing any real... What a surprise! That's better. Okay, what's going on? I'm going to start smelling conspiracy if that happens again.
Restart the clock.
Yeah, restart the clock. Check, hello? Okay, hey, sort of works. Okay, I'm going to start over. Queen Victoria did repeal the enacting clause in Section 2 of the British North America Act 1867. You gotta be kidding. Thereby removing any real or perceived authority to any and all statements of the said document, and removing any and all provisions for any successors or heirs, including but not limited to Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, regarding the said document, including but not limited to changing the name or allowing the name of the document to be changed. Really? In order to portray it as a valid document. There is not a document from 1867. Really? Why am I not surprised? Okay. There is not a document from 1867 called the Constitution Act, and therefore, the Constitution Act 1867 and the what's the next one? Constitution Act 1982, both of those documents are a fraud and an unlawful attempt to rename and resurrect the British North America Act, contrary to the deliberate actions of Queen Victoria in the Statute Law Revision Act 1893. People are talking about a divorce. No divorce is needed when there's no marriage. I'm not telling Albertans what to do, but Albertans do have an option. No divorce is needed when there's never been a marriage. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have been assured that the mics are fixed. At least the AV people tell me that, so. Speaker 23, please.
Chair, you know, I'm a
Sure.
little bit wobbly.
Sure.
And I'm just going to read what I wrote because it took me a long time to write it. First of all, I want to recognize the Indigenous lands that we are on this evening. I think that that's very important. Secondly, I feel that what I'm going to say here is not going to be popular in this room. Please don't heckle me, I'm an old lady, okay? And it may take me a while to get my words out because I don't do this very often. So my family homestead here in the late 1800s. My great-grandparents came from Newfoundland. My great-uncle died on Vimy Ridge. I just found this all out, I'm sorry. My uncle fought in World War II. I was born in Red Deer and raised in Alberta. I've spent almost all my life here. I'm an Albertan and a proud Canadian. I appreciate what Canada stands for, our beautiful mosaic country, home of the free and the brave. I recognize that right now, Alberta is struggling with jobs and etc., and we are looking for someone to blame. Unfortunately, we're blaming the governments. I believe that Alberta has been a downward spiral for decades. So what I ask of all Albertans is that we be kinder and more compassionate. and have empathy for each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker 24 to come to the microphone, please. Speaker 24.
Good evening. My name is Murray Fraser. I'm a fourth generation Albertan. I've worked in the oil and gas industry for 30 plus years, a third of that time in Houston, Texas, and traveled quite a bit. And one thing I've noticed is they don't apologize for their oil and gas industry like we do in Canada. They have a leader of their country that brags about their increased production. We have a leader of their country here in Canada that wants to shut ours down. And I've also noticed that there isn't any other country in the world that's trying to destroy one of their legitimate industries the way we are. It's just Canada. And within Canada, we're trying to destroy one industry and that's it. And it just happens to be Alberta's main industry that my ancestors worked in Turner Valley. And I've worked in and my father worked in. So what is it about Alberta that's so special within Confederation? I'm a Wexiteer or a separatist, and I think we could solve this problem and at least have some leverage in our negotiations with Ottawa if we had a legitimate walkaway option. Otherwise, it's just whining. And we've done way too much whining. It's time to negotiate, and it's time to negotiate tough. Sharing our toys and playing nice in the Canadian sandbox has not worked out well. I support all the points of the 9-point plan, and I would like to emphasize that the fundamental problem here, in particular equalization, I'd like to see us have a referendum to end equalization with a 1-year deadline. After that, we have a referendum on separation. Let's stop sharing our toys and playing nice. I think the fundamental problem here is power and wealth. The wealth is in the West and the power is in the East, and nobody shares power unless they have to. And without a legitimate walkaway option, we're just whining, we're not negotiating. It's time that we got smart and negotiated in this country and in this province in particular. Thank you.
All right, I'll keep this fairly quick. My name is Josh Andrews. I'm here with Project Federation. If you want to talk after, I'll stick around. For starters, Section 121 of the Canadian Constitution reads that all articles of the growth, produce, or manufacture of any one of the provinces shall, from and after the Union, be admitted free into each of the other provinces. Now, I don't know how we can't get our product to Tidewater if that's in the Constitution, but it has received an incredibly restrictive interpretation by the courts, and that needs to be clarified at a constitutional conference preferred. Secondly, equalization, abolish it. We can't afford to subsidize $7 a day daycare in Quebec anymore while they're Finally, any fair deal that we want needs to be maintained after the fact that we get it. And currently 199 of the 338 seats in the House of Commons reside in 2 provinces, Quebec and Ontario. Regardless of what we do, if they want to stop our energy products or any other produce, whether it be agricultural goods or plastic, they can. And that needs to be addressed. Like, we need a fair deal. We need fair representation in the House of Commons or in the Senate, and that's where the Triple-E Senate comes in. We need an elected Senate that has an equal number of senators per province and has effective powers so that we can actually protect ourselves from Ottawa when these governments keep coming after us. And I'm going to leave 20 seconds on the clock.
Speakers 26 through 30 to come to the front, please. 26 through 30. Feel like I should be calling bingo. Speaker 26 can go right to the microphone, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gurpreet Bajwa, and I was not born in Canada. I've stayed on 4 countries, 3 different continents. With great regret, I must say that Canada is the only country which believes in weakening their own industry. It's primarily because of Mr. Trudeau. I don't know if you're getting a fair deal, but I'll tell you what is unfair deal. An unfair deal is that Mr. Bill Mulder forgets that he has a chateau in France, but a small mom and pop shop in Alberta is shut down by the Canada Revenue Agency because they failed to pay their $5,000. That's not fair. What is not fair is Mr. Trudeau continues to distribute $50 million via Twitter account to somebody in South Africa and is more concerned about 2,000 jobs lost in Oshawa, but this not even a peep when hundreds of thousands of jobs are lost in Alberta. That's sad. It's disgusting and it's ridiculous. I'm not affected yet directly, but my fellow Albertans are. And I must say that in my professional life, I've observed how Canada Revenue Agency deals with everybody. Of late, there was a survey by the CRA, or for the CRA, where 90% of Canadians disagreed with them. They hammered them. We as Albertans need to take back that. We need to have our own tax agency. We must not tolerate these fools gladly. Thank you.
Good evening. Over the course of the past 6 weeks, I have argued that it is not only the moral, ethical, logical, legal, social, cultural, historical, and had I not missed my bus to Lloydminster, I would have argued theological responsibility of the human beings on this panel to recommend the decriminalization of sex work to the Albertan government, but that such a course of action by the Fair Deal panel would be entirely within the mandate of this panel as it is presented to ordinary Albertans such as myself at these events. Little more remains to be said, therefore, than some thank yous and some goodbyes. In order to mourn, honor, and grieve Jason Kenney, I would like to present this panel with a tobacco pouch. Inside of this pouch are several ties. Enough not just for the Fair Deal panel members, but also for the service staff who did the generally invisible and thankless job of making sure that these events went off smoothly. Inside each tie you'll find some medicine, as well as prayer for the spirit of Jason's good striker, that it may have a safe and restful journey to the spirit world. I would request that each of you take one of these ties and go respectfully out onto this beautiful land of ours and leave it there for the spirit of Jason Kenney. In my other hand, I hold a sack of humble hot potatoes. I would request that each of the panel members hold one of these potatoes in their hand, and as the glad warmth from that potato seeps into the fragile, tiny bones of your human hands, that you imagine that you hold human life in those hands, for that, panel members, is the responsibility that has been given to you in your appointment to this panel. A fair deal for Albertans entails a fair deal for all Albertans, including sex workers and their clients.
Thank you, sir, for your consideration. And thank you, everyone else.
Thank you and goodbye.
And can I ask Speaker 28 to come to the microphone, please? Speaker 28? No 28? Going once? Going twice? All right, Speaker 29, please.
That's a hard act to follow. If you don't mind, I'd like to just speak to the audience as well as the panel. All of these ideas that came out tonight and have been coming out in the last months or so, including, by the way, the one about the parks. I kind of like that one. I'm a toll guy myself, At any rate, I don't think any of this is going to work unless we are able to grab the minds, the hearts, and the souls of all Western Canadians to our cause. It just won't work. Therefore, I was in Ottawa during the years of René Lévesque, who won that overwhelming majority in 1977. In 1980, the Trudeau Liberals beat him by 7 points in Quebec. How did they do that? They went and got the minds and the souls and the hearts of Quebecers, and also used the rest of Canada to do it. How did they do that? They used a lot of money. They gave money to public interest groups, to media, to industries. They spread that money out and got people on side. I hate to ask how much the CBC got, but it would be a huge amount. Unless we gather the support of Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, I don't know if our cause is going to go very far. I propose we do something like this hockey player out here. There's one on the stands, you know. Drew Barnes. Did he ever tell you about his hockey career? It's a real good one. But why don't we form a huge hockey team? Because I don't know if anybody's ever played in sports, but you form a team and you get people behind you and they'll die for you in the dying moments of that game. We have to form a hockey team in Western Canada that will support all the initiatives we want to take. We can do that. We have the money to do that. Because if, I'll tell you right now, the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau is looking at how he can divide us, put money into public interest groups, universities, wherever he can get the support to go against Alberta. So, everybody in favor of a hockey team?
Thank you. I ask speaker 30 to count, and I ask speakers 31 to 35 to start making their way to the front, please. Thank you.
Hey, hello panel members, my name is Rob Anderson. I've lived in Airdrie most of my life. The stated goal of the Trudeau Liberals is to phase out Alberta's primary industry. They talk about doing it in 10, 20 years. The other parties talk about doing it in 2 or 3 years, other than obviously the Conservatives. That is the stated goal of this government and the majority of the people in this country outside of Alberta, because they voted for these parties. The Alberta government, that's simply, we can't do this. This can't go on. Status quo is not acceptable. The Alberta government must secure an equitable New Deal for Alberta within Confederation and simultaneously prepare the province to form a new nation in the event Ottawa refuses to agree to that New Deal. This includes all of the points that you've been discussing in your panel, CPP, Alberta Pension Plan, Police Force, tax collection, all of it. However, what does the New Deal have to look like? Well, it has to include at the minimum repealing and making unconstitutional any federal laws that regulate our provincial resources, including the imposed carbon tax, oil tanker ban, and no new pipeline legislation. Amending the Constitution to end all equalization payments between provinces is an entirely failed program, and the folks from Project Confederation laid out the reasons why. Altering the representation in the House of Commons to be entirely proportional to the population of each province, transferring Alberta's proportional share of all federal transfers and spending into provincial coffers through tax points and so forth, and establishing a national resource corridor that allows complete free flow of resources to all 3 coasts and throughout Canada. Again, panel members, I would say that the status quo is not acceptable any longer. Alberta cannot survive this for another 10, 20 years, and our children and our grandchildren are going to be forced to move and find opportunity elsewhere if we sit and do nothing. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and particularly the panel. My name is Daryl Ned. I love Alberta and Albertans, but I've fallen out of love with Canada. I'm an owner of an oil field services company in Airdrie. We like to be referred to more as an employer these days rather than any other term for a corporation, as the key driver of our business in recent years has been primarily to preserve the livelihood of 20 people. We were once 30. We dream of a return to profitability, but that won't be anytime soon under the current mood of Canadians or the government they've chosen. Except for the difficulty and the time required, I've become a separatist. I'm proud of Canada's history, but Canada's future doesn't align with my vision of what's necessary to live free, healthy, and prosperously in years to come. This Albertan believes we must gain as much autonomy and financial independence from the rest of Canada as we are able, regardless of the immediate economic cost or instability it may cause. We need to collect Alberta taxes in Alberta. First provincial taxes, but eventually, in step with Quebec, federal taxes. CRA is not in touch with Albertans. The jobs associated with collecting taxes belong in Alberta, not anywhere else in Canada. I believe we are treated with a level of disparagement that fellow Albertans would not be capable of. Finally, the optics of huge transfers leaving Alberta for Ottawa in lump sums controlled by us work better in our favor for leverage than having it sucked out by Ottawa in hundreds of thousands of small streams. Canada needs to see the river of money that adds up to, that this all adds up to. The Alberta pension plan is a no-brainer, just do it. The provincial police force, I'm in favor of a presentation that has to come on the Alberta police force. Essentially, we need to separate ourselves from Canada in every possible way, as short of separating from Canada to become our own nation. But even that needs to be on the table, because there is no fulcrum too large to leverage the rest of Canada into a fair deal for Alberta.
Lauren Kinney, Calgary. Thank you, panel, for your volunteer work. I know that's a difficult place to be, but I think I just want to start with, I think we have a watershed time coming, and that's the Frontier Tech Corporation. And I think we're looking at about 10,000 jobs, 250,000 barrels a day. Sounds like a lot of money. And I think if this does not get approved, we're not going to be worried about getting this 9-point plan in position, because I think we're going to see everyone looking for exiting the Alberta and moving out on their own. I think that would be the thing that's going to push everyone to the point where they're going to really have to think about, where can we go? It's pretty bleak. That's all. Thanks.
I'm just going to project. Oh, God, no. Sorry, I didn't realize it was back on, but I started projecting with the drama voice that I have perfected. All right, speaker 33, please. Under the O33. Under the O33. Okay, we'll go to 34.
Hello, my name's Ron, and I've been an Albertan for most of my life. I've lived in Eastern Canada and also on the West Coast. And for my 61 years on the planet, I've seen a lot. Believe me, I've seen a lot. And this fair deal, I was actually looking forward to it. And I said, okay, fine. So over the last few weeks, since I got my ticket, I asked myself, yeah, we've got this question about confederation and stuff, but what I want to do is turn the question around for a fair deal for Albertans. Like many people in this province, my wife and I are struggling. We're in insolvency. We can't, we're worried about our mortgage. We're worried about our insurance payments. We're worried about all the other stuff that people in this room also worry about. So what I'm asking is that you turn the gaze inward to see exactly how you can improve our base before thinking about doing anything with confederation. The upshot is, first take care of us, then the rest of it we can worry about later. And I'm also asking you to take a hard look about the consequences. What are our roads going to be like going in and out of the province? How are our duties going to increase, or income tax going to increase? What about costs of moving goods in and out of this province? That's going to increase. And if it could come to the separation, what would the currency be like? We have less people than Mexico, and I'm afraid an Alberta dollar or so would be less than a Mexican peso. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker 35 to come up to the microphone, and speakers 36 to 40 to make their way to the front, please.
Hi there. My name's Marnie Marr. I'm an accountant and I own an accounting firm here in Airdrie. I was born and raised in Manitoba. And so about 30 years ago, when I was a teenager, we learned about equalization. And I remember at the time in Manitoba saying, but why does Alberta pay it? That makes no sense. Why do Albertans pay that? And the teacher didn't really have a good answer. He said they agreed to it, so they have to pay it. Well, I didn't agree to it. I've moved here. I never agreed to that. I never picked that. I don't know why we're sticking with that. However, I understand that that requires agreement for a bunch of provinces. It requires all kinds of things. We can't do that today. That should be our long-term plan to redo equalization. But for today, there's a bunch of things we can do. We can do our own police force. We can do our own CPP plan. We can do our own everything, basically, our own medical system. We can do everything. What we need to understand here is not just can we do it and is there financial benefits and will it send a message to Ottawa. It's also about what's the service we're getting right now. And the service we're getting is bad. It's really bad. In regards to the RCMP, they get their marching orders from Ottawa. They are still doing their jobs based on what Trudeau wants to have happen. They're not doing what Albertans need. My sister lives alone on an acreage. They want to take guns away. She had 2 high crackheads come to her house in the middle of the night. What is my sister supposed to do without a rifle there? What's she gonna do? We need to be able to support ourselves with what Alberta needs, not just what the government thinks that we need. Also, with the whole thing with getting our own police force, that's been done. That's done in Ontario, that's done in Newfoundland, that's done all kinds of places. There's no reason why we can't do that ourselves and make that exactly what we need when we need it. Now, secondarily, as an accountant, I deal every day with the CRA and with the CPP program and with all of these things. And I deal every day with Albertans who are going bankrupt, every day. And these people, they can't, their marriages are going down, their kids don't have houses anymore, everything's going bad for them, and the CRA calls up, a Quebec officer calls up and says, well, get them to sell some of their toys. I know what happens in Alberta. And you can't imagine the anger that I have, and I think, thank God I'm standing between these people and the CRA, because if the CRA said that to that poor person, we could have a suicide. We need better service, and Albertans would deliver it. The CPP program is also the exact same thing. All of our programs are bad, and we need to do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 36, please.
Well, panel, thank you for this opportunity. My condolences for the loss of Chief Goodstriker. I am an immigrant to Canada and to Alberta. 14 years ago, I chose to move here from Ireland with my family. And I can tell you, 14 years ago when I got my first paycheck, I was delighted to see how much money I was able to take home. And I was delighted to see what I got in return for my taxes. I cannot say the same today. I cannot say that we're getting a fair deal as individuals or as Albertans. I have seen the return on my taxes diminish, and I have seen Alberta's place in Confederation diminish over that period of time. I provide professional services, I sell professional services to private and public sectors as I meet with managers, directors, C-suites of these organizations from Cenovus down to small oil and gas field services. They want to invest in their people, but they cannot because they're struggling just to keep those jobs. As we see industries move their head offices south of the border, we see decision-making power move south of the border. We lose control, and we lose autonomy, and we lose power. Alberta is not getting a fair deal. What would a fair deal look like? A fair deal would look like a federal government that was proud of Alberta's contribution, not just to Confederation, but to the world. We would be promoting our oil and gas as the solution to problems. India would not be building coal-fired generation plants. It would be using our natural gas to uplift their standard of living. It would be proud of who we are. Unfortunately, I do not believe that Alberta can get a fair deal because of two things. First thing is, our political system does not give us representation that is of any value. We can vote blue until we're blue in the face, and it won't matter a twig. Secondly, ideologically, our federal government has sided with global activists that have decided that the problem is here, and not in China, and not in India, and not in Nigeria, who are filthy and dirty industry, and they've sided with those globalists to destroy their own people. If this is how we're treated by our friends in Confederation, why are we staying friends with them? Your best to get these points that, and I agree with the 9 points, and I'm not going, maybe repetition is reinforcing, and you've heard a lot of it. Let's do it, let's get the pension plan, let's get the police, do all of that, that's fine. But unless we're willing to take separation seriously, then none of that matters a bit. We don't need a fair deal, we need a new deal, and not a new deal, we need a new nation. And we can't do it.
Speaker 37, please.
Good evening, my name is Alan Hunter. I am a National Service Officer for veterans from the right coast to left, people that put their lives on the line continuously. Some that are over in foreign lands right now, they had to call Rent-to-Rec to get there because guess what? We don't look after our soldiers very well, we don't look after our seniors very well, but we look after our politicians very well. It's time to stop. Fair definition is marked by impartiality and honesty, free from self-interest, prejudice, or favoritism. That leaves out Justin Trudeau and his party. I survived the first Trudeau, God willing I'll survive the second one. I want to put some numbers forward. We gave $1.6 billion to CBC. We gave $1.6 billion to SNC-Lavalin in Montreal to do their subways that Bombardier may or may not be able to deliver. $12 million to Stupid Store, $2.7 million to Canadian Tire to plug in the electric toys, and the list goes on. I have a family member that was told after 4 years of disability, I'm sorry, but you haven't worked 2 of the last X number of years, so you don't qualify. I work with organizations that deal with refugees. They're told, come on in, everything you get starts free. Everything is going to be free. We've got seniors in this country being told, wait 2 to 4 years to get your hips replaced, and we keep going back to the same thing. Let's have another panel, let's have another discussion. 6,700 veterans in this country right now that have fought in sandboxes around the Middle East are waiting for an answer from the government to look after the needs where they got wounded. We're sending them out there again, as I said, Rent-to-Rec. CPP is being denied. Tax points, all those things are great. I got 9 seconds left to say it. What's the stick we're going to use? We need to say to them, what's the value for us staying? Not going to them and convincing them that this is our country. Because it's the farmers, the ranchers, and the electricians and everybody else that built it, not the politicians. We need to remember that because this is our country.
Speaker 38 to come up to the microphone, please. And don't forget, the panel will be doing some mingling afterwards, so don't rush off at the end of the last speakers. Thanks.
Good evening, my name is Al Neich. I'm born and raised Albertan, for better or for worse. While I was working gainfully and chasing a career, I didn't really care too much about what was happening in Ottawa. This life was good. Have a job, house, family, everybody's doing well. And so I wasn't looking at this. I wasn't except for the occasional bouts of laughter as to what they would get up to down there. But now that I've had some time to look at things, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for the welfare and the future of my daughters. And you know, I'm looking at these nine-point plan to fix Confederation, and they're all very good points. But is this something that we should have to negotiate for? I mean, is it something that we should have to fight for? Can we rely on devoted federalists to truly have our interests at heart and to negotiate in good faith with a government that is clearly malevolent? Are these aims possible within Confederation? You know, we shouldn't have to negotiate for a fair deal. I mean, if we're in this country together, if we're in this together, it should be a fair deal for everyone. That was what the country was founded on, right? It's a democracy, but it's starting to feel less and less like a democracy. The other point I wanted to make is that, you know, really, technically, we are a province or a region of our country that's under siege. We're constantly bombarded by whatever social justice or culture wars or identity politics or you name it. We're being attacked. We're going to lose our rights and freedoms under this current government. So why negotiate for it? I mean, we're going to go through all this work to try and achieve these aims. We might as well do it as a separate country.
Hi, my name is I want to stay. And I think separating isn't a good idea. We're landlocked, we're in the middle of Canada. Things aren't rosy right now, but I believe things will get better. I think leadership needs to change to the south with Trump. No, just listen, I know, but he said that he wanted to make them, the US, the biggest exporter of oil, and all of a sudden, we can't push our oil, but Trudeau did buy us a pipeline, him and Notley helped put it in. So I think things will get better.
Everyone gets a turn to speak.
I think things will get better. I also want to say that the fair deal, the last two times the deal was negotiated, wasn't it with Jason Kenney when he was finance minister with Harper? So, like, that has something to do with this too. But yeah, separating is silly, and I think it's hurting us even talking about it. It's driving investment away. People don't want to come here and set up shop with an unstable province. I was talking about leaving. And that's a fact. You can Google it. Anyway,
Thank you. This is the last speaker of the night.
Hi, and I wanted to, but my name is Gary Locke. I'm from Airdrie. I hate to admit that I agree with Rob Anderson, but the status quo needs to change. I hate to say, Alan Hunter, I agree with you, but I did live through the first Trudeau, and I'm going to survive the second one. But I am a proud Canadian. I love Alberta. I'm a fourth generation Albertan. I am responsible partially for the fifth and sixth generation that currently live in Airdrie. I love Alberta. I love Canada. I want Alberta to be part of Canada. So yes, we have a lot of suggestions. That's what you are going to do. Those are the short-term goals. The long-term goal that you must take is get Alberta and the rest of Western Canada a fair deal in the Senate so that we can make change. We have to make change so that we don't have to bicker over some of these little items. We should not be discussing a pipeline that goes to Quebec. This isn't about Liberal government. Every government's had the responsibility to move that pipeline to Quebec. We need to quit whining like Albertans and be part of Canada. We need to, because they're tired of listening to Albertans. We need to work together as maybe a Western province says, but we need fair representation so that they can't stomp on us. And nobody, I don't understand how you can have half a brain and not buy Alberta product when you're buying from Saudi and Venezuela. We need to be part of Alberta. I'm proud to be Alberta, and I hope that's how you take your fight, is as Albertans and as a Canadian. Thank you very much.
So, thank you for that. That was the end of our speakers for tonight. So I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who had the courage to come up and speak tonight. I know it's not always the easiest thing to get up in a group in front of a room of 400 strangers and speak. But to those who did, thank you very much. And just before you dash, and please don't dash because the panel will be mingling again, but before you don't dash out of here, I would like to pass it over to our chair, Ms. Arisioleni, for just a few closing comments. Thank you.
Thank you for attending tonight's Fair Deal panel. And thank you to those who stepped up to the mic. I know it's not easy to speak in front of a lot of people, and it takes a fair bit of courage. So thank you very much. We'd also like to thank those who could not or did not speak tonight. You may not have had the opportunity to speak or may not have wished to speak in front of the crowd, but you clearly are interested and you've engaged by being here. And hopefully we can hear your ideas in other ways. I mentioned earlier, and Heather did as well, that there's a one-pager available at the back of the room. We encourage you to write down your views so that the panel can absorb what you have to say. And we also welcome submissions from you at info@fairdeal.ca. We will use what we learn from these discussions with Albertans, what we read in the submissions to the panel and sent to our emails, and what we hear at what we've heard at town halls, to develop a report outlining what we've heard and our recommendations to the government. Thank you again. As noted earlier, this work will conclude on March 31st, 2020. We look forward to hearing from you, those of you who have not had a chance to speak, in the coming weeks through the electronic submissions or through the online survey that I mentioned earlier. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, and drive safe. Sir? Yes?
Of course. Maybe I can replace communism with fighting, man. No.